You know, I'm going out of my comfort zone, and that can be scary. I mean that my background is red instead of blue this time, and on that topic I feel I must explain why. So, some year, the specifics don't really matter, the organization Autism Speaks announced that they wanted to make the color of autism blue. But since the organization continuously proves to not actually care about autistic people and are even against them in most cases, the autistic community has instead decided to go with red in protest. And that's why the color of my background is different, as I don't want to give the wrong idea. But you may be wondering why I even care about such a topic, as most people don't care, as they really don't have a reason to. But I do, because I am autistic, which is something that surprises people for some reason. I mean, I use a Lucario profile picture on the internet and watch Jar. Their surprise is honestly more of a surprise to me. Awful jokes aside, I feel like what makes people unable to recognize my own autism is people's general lack of knowledge on the topic, and that's not their fault. It's this fucker's fault. In all seriousness, while I would have made a very angry video on the topic, not even all that long ago, I now realize that doing so wouldn't accomplish anything. I've grown to the mindset that everyone has good intentions, in most cases, so when someone misrepresents autism, I'm no longer made angry by it, but more so sad. You may have noticed, though, that this video is coming out sometime during Autism Awareness Month, and it's because I figured it would be a good time to discuss the topic. Although I don't have that much unique to say, which is why I want to instead talk about how it's impacted my own life, going through both the ups and downs of living life autistic, and what it's like. Now, since explaining what autism is so difficult, I feel that you should instead focus on what I have to say, instead of what's on screen. So, for this reason, I'll be doing something that I normally never do and have footage of my favorite video game on screen. Now don't worry, this won't be the entire video. Anyhow, autism is a developmental disorder that affects a small 1% of the population. The disorder most commonly affects socialization and communication, which I say holds up very well for me, as I struggle with social cues that most others just kind of understand, a lot of my social life entirely consisting of just a few people. Granted, I wouldn't really say my social skills are any worse than your average shy person. As for the communication stuff, about a third of autistic people don't develop the proper communication skills for life, and I'd say while difficult, is something that can be helped, as while I was once at a point where even speaking was difficult, I'm now out of that, mostly because of therapy. Behavioral and speech therapy are examples of which the weaknesses of autism can be mitigated, and while I didn't quite have any major behavioral problems as a kid, I'll be the first to tell you that speech therapy is why I'm even able to read the script out to you at all, as while I still struggle to properly pronounce certain words, I'm in a far better place than I once was. Another aspect of autism, though, is the need to do repetitive behavior, and I'd say this one applies to most on the spectrum, as I struggle to keep my attention without fidgeting or stimming, and other stuff along those lines. This also means that autistic people tend to hate change, although it's not all of them. As an example, autistic YouTuber Fudge repeatedly makes jokes about how he hates the algorithm promoting people who make the same style of content, and based on the variety of topics I discuss, I think you could tell that I mostly agree with him. Despite my multitude of interests, though, I would say that I'm yet another person on the spectrum with special interests, and while I experience it very differently to others, I'd say that it's still a huge part of my own autism. Now, my primary interest is very obviously Pokemon, with me having such a colossal amount of knowledge on it that I very rarely need to do any research on it to make videos on it, like I would for most other topics I discuss, those being video games, anime, and cartoons, although I hope to eventually dabble into discussing animated movies and professional wrestling. Now, while I have so many interests, I'd say that I have special interests, as unlike neurotypical people, if I'm not seeing anything along the mostly specific lines I've drawn, it remains almost impossible for you to grab my attention, even more so than your average person. But autistic people also tend to have sensory issues. As an example, school was always hell to me because tolerating all of the constant noise from others was very difficult, and while noise is the trigger for me, it isn't that way for everyone. But after describing all of this, you may be saying that everything stated seems like it applies to most people, and while it does, autistic people tend to have many of these, and have them more severely than your average person, and that's why the phrase, "aren't we all a little autistic," pisses me off, even if the people saying it have good intentions. Also, keep in mind that I didn't mention the smaller details related to autism, as I wanted to give a simple approach to this topic, as giving a basic understanding at first will be the best step, in having people better understand this extraordinarily complex disorder. Also, I wanted to quickly mention how similar autism may seem to disorders like ADHD and OCD, and to that there's not much I can add outside of the fact that they're just different enough to be classified as such. I'm not a professional in that field, so I really can't elaborate any farther than that. But I think that's it. So, I think we can all agree that anti-vaxxers are some of the stupidest people on the planet, and while you may have a strong opinion on them, I have an even stronger one, as they decided to put autism into the mix. And there's a few reasons as to why I dislike that. Firstly, it's scientifically false, as autism is something you're born with, and the only reason people thought vaccines were linked to it at all was because signs of autism start around the time of a first vaccination. Hell, the first documented signs of autism appeared half a century before vaccines even existed, and funnier than that, there's actually a vaccine for rubella with a 1% chance to prevent autism. Like, there's no good arguments from the opposing side. It's fucking ridiculous. The second reason, though, is because it implies that autism is strictly a bad thing. And while yes, it very, very much can be, for most high-functioning people, it doesn't have either a significantly positive or negative effect on a person's life. For me, for instance, I'd say that the good and bad sides of it even themselves out enough to the point where I'd simply consider myself to be different. Not quite special, since there's nothing all that notable about me, and certainly not Christian. Oh God. It's because of autism's effects that there's a split in the community. There's a group who believes that there should be a cure, while there's another that believes that we should accept them with open arms, and that it's the world that should change to accommodate them. And I want to explain why both points of views are flawed. Again, I dislike the former due to how it implies that autism is strictly a bad thing. But if we ignore that, then I would say that for people who severely struggle with it, then a cure should be available if even possible, but that it should be illegal to give to children due to their inability to properly consent. The latter, on the other hand, is one that I actually used to agree with until I watched a video from transgender YouTuber Blair White on why the transgender community will never be truly respected, and it's because they went down the same path that autistic people are trying to go for on that ladder. The thing is, it comes across as selfish to demand that others must change their lives for you, and while that may suck for you, it's evidence that you must try a different approach, and while masking causes mental health issues, it's the best thing that you have to go with as a result of what I said. And while we can make slow changes to better accommodate autistic people, like educating others on it and decreasing the bafflingly high unemployment rate, the reality is that you'll just have to suck up the fact that life will be harder for you because life wasn't built for you. Granted, this does not mean that you should wallow in your own self-pity. It just means that you had to recognize the position you're in and make the most out of it, because guess what? If you're an autistic person watching this video, I can guarantee you that you can do some truly exceptional things. I was born, and while I had previously spent months living in my mom's stomach, I now got to truly experience the world. And I did, but there was something different. My parents noticed something about my development, and in their search to find out why, I received my diagnosis. According to my mom, my dad went into panic mode, but my mom just spent all of her time into researching how to raise me. But even then, there was something both my parents agreed on, and that was their concern for my future. They both thought I would never even be able to speak, but with my mom's incredible hard work, and apparently my own want to improve, I was able to, and while my life would still be very different to your average person, I was at least at a point where I could finally interact with them. Elementary school was fairly normal. I'd get teased occasionally, but outside of that, there's not much notable about my early life outside of after the first 4 years of it, there was a program specific to helping autistic people, which is where I credit a lot of how I got here at all. Middle school, on the other hand, is when things would fall flat on its face. On average, autistic people are far more likely to experience bullying, anxiety, and depression. And guess what happened to me in middle school? Every single fucking one of them. Seriously, the scars of middle school will be ones that will never heal, but even then it did tell me some seriously important, harsh truths, and that not every special ed teacher will actually know how to help you, and that most people, at least in a school setting, are complete assholes, and that hiding every single little bit about yourself is how you're going to survive in this unforgivable world. And that's what I did. All the way through middle and high school, I had a mask, and even then I was still unhappy. I was depressed due to not being able to fully express myself, and while I was no longer bullied, I was anxious out of a fear that someone would find some way to trample all over my pitifully low self-esteem. But things could have been so much worse if it wasn't for my supportive family and friends, a relatable set of shows to help me forget about my struggles, and my YouTube channel. Without those, I wouldn't be nearly as happy as I am now. And while I don't know where my life will take me next, I thank every single one of you who has clicked on even one of my videos, as that's what gives my life purpose. It's because of these things that I'm happy to say that my life is better because I'm autistic. It's so annoying how stupidly personal I get at the end of every video now. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this one, but more so that you learned something from it, as that was this video's purpose. I wanted to create something that could condense nearly every subject related to autism into one video, without it going on for too long or getting too confusing, and I also wanted to get more into how my own life is affected by it, as having that personal aspect would allow you to more easily understand the differences in each autistic person's life. But again, thank you a lot for watching this one, and I'll see you again soon.